Whilst we are almost certainly in the middle of a bubble, discussions around the inclusion of AI contributions into a project are not going away anytime soon. Sometimes a project just doesn't have a policy, and then someone tries to submit something that is just utter garbage, like we saw with Mesa. And then other times a project does have a policy, maybe even a really hard stance against it where they've had a lot of negative interactions, and then someone comes along and actually does something productive and finds real problems, like was recently seen with curl. And the latest party to get involved is the Fedora project. Now, this discussion has been going on for a couple of months now, maybe even much longer than that, but the official voting is about a month or so ago. With how much hassle the project has around software patents and free software licenses, honestly, I'm surprised it's taken this long to even get here, and recently there was the council policy proposal, Policy on AI-Assisted Contributions, which has been marked as approved with the very clear red as approved. I have mentioned this many times. Apparently they are working on some new system that's not gonna have red for approved, but this has been the way it's worked for a long time. I don't like it. I don't think anyone likes it. I don't know why it's red. And like with every other Fedora ticket, the majority of the discussion isn't happening here. Instead, that's over on Fedora discussion. So, conversations about the use of AI contributions in Fedora aren't starting with this thread. There have been discussions going back since 2024, there've probably been some more unofficial ones before then, and it's been something the project has had to deal with, right? Like, you can't just ignore AI exists. You can't say, oh, I don't care about it, AI's not real, I'm just going to ignore that it exists. It exists, and you're going to do something about it. Whether that's including it or not including it, including in certain context, you have to do something. Opened by Jason Brooks, artificial intelligence is a transformative technology, and as a leader in open source, the Fedora project needs a thoughtful position to guide innovation and protect our community's values. The draft we are proposing below is our best effort to synthesize the Fedora community's input into a set of clear, actionable guidelines. It is designed to empower our contributors to explore the positive uses of AI we identified, while creating clear guardrails to protect the project and its values from the risks we highlighted. Our philosophy: AI as a tool to advance free software. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say, don't these tools just openly violate software licenses? They are bringing in code to your open source project that is not compatible with your license, and they're bringing code into your proprietary project that is not something you can make proprietary. And I tend to lean towards that side, and I know a lot of other people are sort of still debating this topic, and there isn't really a clear legal answer yet. I do think long-term that this is going to have to completely redesign how software copyright works, how software patents work, because you can't just have a system that openly just takes all this information and then pretends like it doesn't exist, right? Like, that's something that has to be properly addressed eventually, whether it's blowing everything up or actually giving a proper answer. The Fedora project is a community built on 4 foundations: freedom, friends, features, and first. First? Yeah, you know what? I will grant you first, definitely. In a lot of cases, Fedora does adopt things first in a way that, maybe they did it a little bit too early. We envision a world where everyone benefits from free and open source software built by inclusive, open-minded communities. In the spirit of our first and features foundations, we see artificial intelligence as a tool to empower our contributors to make a more positive impact on the world. We recognize the ongoing and important global discussions about how AI models are trained. Our policy focuses on the responsible use of these tools. So this guy knows, and the people he's discussed this with know, that you're not going to change the entire industry. So instead of trying to do that and just waste your time, how can we best make use of these tools that do exist in a sensible way? The responsibility for respecting the work of others and adhering to open source licenses always rests with the contributor. AI assistants, like any other tool, must be used in a way that upholds these principles. Fundamentally, I don't think they can do that. Do I think that matters? That's another discussion entirely. But I do think, at least right now, this is not something the tools are capable of unless you know exactly what the model was trained on. So here we have the initial policy. Since the posting of this, there has been some adjustment, but overall it's basically the same thing. Most of the issues, and we'll go over these, are about specific kinds of phrasing and ensuring there aren't just massive gaps in the policy. You are responsible for your contributions. AI-generated content must be treated as a suggestion, not as final code or text. It is your responsibility to review, test, and understand everything you submit. Submitting unverified or low-quality machine-generated content, sometimes called AI slop, this specific phrasing was removed from the policy because it sounds a bit too aggressive. It doesn't really need to be there, creates an unfair review burden on the community, and is not an acceptable contribution. This is a big part of the reason why Mesa made their policy, because there was that guy who was like, oh, I'm just going to generate this code, and then it's up to the reviewers to review the code, whereas that's not the point of a reviewer. It's to verify the code fits within the project and do some final discussion about it, but you as the contributor need to understand the code and need to know what it actually does. Be transparent about your use of AI. When a contribution has been significantly assisted by AI tools, we encourage you to note this in your pull request description, commit message, or whatever authorship is normally indicated for the work. This did lead to some further discussion about how to specifically phrase that. Like, what if we have a commit message? Should the trailer be? Should it be assisted by, generated by? What specific terminology? But I think ultimately this is a good thing. If you're using the tool, just be honest about the fact that you're using the tool. You don't need to pretend like you're some incredible, amazing programmer if you're using this tool. If you're using it, just say it. That's okay. Fedora values your voice. Clear, concise, and authentic communication is our goal. Using AI tools to translate your thoughts or overcome language barriers is a welcome and encouraged practice, but keep in mind, we value your unique voice and perspective. This is one of those areas where I think even the most hardline anti-AI people generally are in favor of. If you're using it as a way to overcome the fact that you're not very fluent in English, you might be an amazing programmer, but you can't really write what you want to write in English, and Fedora is an English project, so you kind of have to do that. That's understandable. Now, this can cause problems like you're doing an AI translation of a user interface into a language you don't understand. You know, it's probably better to leave that to someone else, but when it's just about contributing to the project overall, I think generally this is a good thing. Limit AI tools for reviewing. Like with going and actually making the code, you should still be reviewing the code. It's okay to be using these tools as a way to identify possible areas you have missed, but ultimately a person needs to still be verifying that the thing is correct. We are not at the point where the AI agents are actually able to do everything by themselves. Will we get there? I don't know. AI in Fedora project management. To avoid introducing uncontrollable bias, AI and ML tools must not be used to score or evaluate submissions for things like code of conduct matters, funding requests, conference talks, or leadership positions. This is not about spam filtering or generating automatic templates, things like that, but if someone is getting banned from the project, actual people need to, have a look at the reason why that's happening. Basically, no AI government, at least just yet. No robots running the country. Earlier we were talking about AI and Fedora developers. Now we're talking about AI tools for Fedora users. AI features must be opt-in. 100%. Any user-facing AI assistant, especially one that sends data to a remote service, must not be enabled by default and requires explicit, informed consent from the user. I completely agree. I don't like having AI tools just forced into my face. I remember seeing I saw a shopping website a while back. I've mentioned this before, I don't know if on this channel. I saw a shopping website a while back where it didn't have a search bar. The way you searched for products is asking the AI assistant to find the product for you. Don't do that. It sucks. We should explore AI for accessibility. Again, like what I was saying earlier for the, translating your commit messages, things like that. This is another area where I think most people agree this is a good thing to have. Now, I don't think you should get rid of the traditional methods because there are people that rely on these tools that don't like the more human-sounding voices. They want a very robotic voice because the robotic voice, whilst it's not going to sound amazing, it's going to sound consistent. These AI synthesizers for text-to-speech can be a little bit weird sometimes. Now, if you're paying attention to the numbers along the side here, you might have noticed, there's a bit of a mistake. Doesn't matter, not important. Maybe AI would fix that. Fedora as a platform for AI development. Package AI tools and frameworks. We encourage the packaging of tools and frameworks needed for AI research and development in Fedora, provided they comply with all existing Fedora packaging and licensing guidelines. So, if people want to make use of AI tools and people want to package them, then package them. That's all it's saying. 4, but actually 5, use of Fedora project data. Aggressive scraping is prohibited. This is a problem that basically everyone in the FOSS world is dealing with right now, where you're seeing tons and tons of sites going behind Anubis, because all of these LLM tools are smashing these sites. So much worse than traditional web crawlers. And honor our licenses. If you're using Fedora data and you want to train a model, then respect the licenses of the data. All that good stuff. And surprising absolutely no one ever, there was quite a bit of discourse about this. However, what might surprise you if you go on places like Mastodon or various other places in the FOSS world is it wasn't anywhere near as negative as you might expect. It wasn't people saying AI bad, we shouldn't have any AI. There was a couple like that. But the majority were just saying, okay, the policy's fine, but let's be hyper-pedantic about the phrasing we're using. This statement ought to be, particularly, AI must not make the final determination on whether a contribution is accepted or not. A should not here would be advisory rather than prescriptive and therefore would be ignored. This language is even less committal. I question why it's in here at all, except to say we considered this, so don't ask us about it, but we couldn't decide what to do about it. Either own it and say the Fedora project does not require that AI tool usage be identified in git commit and or merge request, or else take a stand and mandate the annotation and note that the intentional violation will be met with penalties up to and including loss of packaging rights. Just don't try to imply something other than what is intended in this policy. And you know what? Yes, this is pedantic, but the point of a policy is to be pedantic. It is to iron out those issues and make it very clear what it is you can and cannot do. That is, unless you're running a big social media website and the goal is to make it unclear. Another pedantic but probably important distinction is the policy does not really define AI, and given the constant blurring of meaning between machine learning, AI, generative AI, LLM, agent, etc., I think we should bring some clarity or at least point to an existing definition. For example, the policy says AI features must be opt-in. So does that mean that we must add opt-in to West North, which is like a open source RTS game, to play against the computer in the main campaign? Because historically, AI was used to mean that too, and that is the term used in the documentation. Again, you might say this is dumb, and obviously that's not what we mean by AI, but it's not obvious. And when you have a policy that is not obvious, people are going to try and exploit that policy. At least initially, Neil Gompa was one of the people who wasn't necessarily in favor of the policy. This whole thread is weird to me. I don't know how the conclusions for this policy proposal were made, because it doesn't seem like it jives with the community sentiment from most contributors. And to address that, we need to jump ahead quite a bit. At Red Hat, we are expected to set and meet goals each quarter if we want our full bonus. One of those is around introducing AI into our daily work. You've probably seen various Red Hat employees talking about using AI. It's hard to deny there is a financial incentive to do so. This is not some crazy Red Hat conspiracy. This is something that Red Hat employees will tell you. This is something that is very public. However, with that being the case, and with Jason Brooks being a Red Hat employee, and with a lot of people involved in Fedora being involved in Red Hat, the people who are not employed at Red Hat, have a bit of weirdness about this. Does this mean there's literally an actual financial incentive for Red Hat employees to push the use of AI? No conspiracy theory needed. If this is true, then that really taints this whole discussion, in my opinion. Michael Catanzaro says, not quite, although not entirely far off. How we use AI is up to us. Michael is using it to generate meeting summaries and things like that. But there is certainly an incentive for Red Hat employees, and Fedora is a Red Hat project, to push the use of AI. Am I saying that is the reason this discussion is happening? Not necessarily. But we cannot deny that is part of the incentive. Moving on from that, Richard Fontana takes some issue with the fact that these models that exist aren't really open. There are open models that do exist, but the definition of open and AI is weird, and maybe you can call it semi-open or something like that, but does that align with Fedora's goals, or is that something where it's like, we're bringing in AI stuff because we want to bring in AI stuff? And regarding the honor our licenses point, this is problematic because the licenses allowed by Fedora do not, or at least are not understood to, require attribution, and certainly not sharing in the mere context of training models. Or am I misunderstanding what this is saying? Any licenses that did require sharing as a condition of training would probably not be allowed in Fedora because they wouldn't be open source. Furthermore, in at least some jurisdictions, it is hopefully likely that doctrines limiting copyright such as fair use would enable training without being restricted by the copyright owner by license conditions or otherwise. Limits on copyright are generally a good thing and is contrary to general traditions in open source. Now, following a lot of the initial feedback, not the feedback saying maybe we shouldn't be doing this, but the feedback saying, hey, let's actually be clear about what we are doing here, the policy was rewritten to be much, much clearer on what we actually mean here, including terms like must not, defining what we mean by should, adopting specific industry standards for what these terms actually mean. But there is one funny point that some people took issue with: AI assistance transparency. In the spirit of the transparency this policy recommends, I want to note that I used AI tools extensively in this revision process. I used NotebookLM to analyze and synthesize the large volume of community feedback, and I used Gemini to help draft the refined language. With that said, I read and edited and tweaked every part of this contribution, and I stand by it, and am eager to participate in more discussion of it. This is exactly the kind of thing we need to avoid. There are only 31 replies that take about an hour to read. It shouldn't take you an hour to read 31 replies, but sure, let's say it does. It is unclear if you read them, or if NotebookLM read them for you. In essence, NotebookLM has evaluated the weight of the contributions. To me, this stands against the principle that human understanding is the better tool for judgment. We must not have LLMs write policy on using and accepting LLMs. Now, the author does say, somewhere down the line here, if we just go to the reply, that yes, he actually did read them. He wasn't just using it like that, but I can understand where the concern for this is coming from. And the majority of the thread continued on basically like this. There were a couple of things here and there like, oh, if I use Google Translate, do I need to specify that I use Google Translate because Google Translate is a neural machine translation service? So again, it's one of these things where it's like, most people understand you probably shouldn't have to do that. However, it is an area where if we're going to say we must disclose AI assistance, this can get like misconstrued in certain contexts, and Google Translate to actually understand the text when English is not your native language, that's like a reasonable use case. But there are other areas like translating a UI where maybe it does make sense to disclose this. And of course, at random points down the line, there were people that did jump in to troll. Most of the people here are completely reasonable, are Fedora contributors, are actually trying to have a proper discussion. But anytime a thread like this exists, you're gonna have a couple of people that decide, hey, I know what I'm gonna do. Let's waste the maintainer's time. Now let's jump over to the vote. Council Policy Proposal, Policy on AI-Assisted Contributions. Even after a lot of the feedback we were seeing, there were still some issues that existed with the policy, so this, for the most part, is the final policy that was adopted. But again, time to be pedantic about specific kinds of phrasing. Here's someone who is against the change. I am -1, see below. Accountability. You must take the responsibility for your contribution. Contributing to Fedora means vouching for the quality, license compliance, and utility of your submission. All contributions, whether from a human author or assisted by a large language model LLM or other generative AI tools, must meet the project standard for inclusion. The contributor is always the author and is fully accountable for their contributions. The last sentence can be read in an ambiguous way. There can be interpreted in a way that excludes content from a generative AI system, which I believe we are trying to assert that a contributor is responsible for anything they contribute, either by themselves or obtained from a generative AI system. Put another way, there can be read to be referring to the individual's own contribution or pointing to the generative AI system's work that the contributor is taking and then contributing. Something like, the contributor is always the author and is fully accountable for the entirety of the contributions, both original works and those assisted by generative AI or something like that. This is basically saying, if I understand it correctly, that the AI system could be assumed to be the author, and the AI system would need to take responsibility. Obviously not what they're trying to say, and I don't think is the way that most people would read it, but again, the point of a policy is to be pedantic. I do have a question about the transparency section. In accountability, we're requiring all contributors to take full responsibility for everything they contribute, be it their own work or AI-assisted work. But then in transparency, we're asking them to label the things AI did or assisted with. Why? To me, that's a conflict with accountability in a few ways. First, it's basically saying we don't fully trust contributors. Second, it's giving contributors a way out of full responsibility for contributions. I don't understand why we want to care about that if we also want contributors to have full responsibility for the contributions. I have other issues with the existence of the policy, and I don't think any revisions will be able to do anything about it. I have strong concerns regarding creator rights and licensing that is still largely an unknown in the world of generative AI systems. I feel strongly about that because I've built my career on open source software and want the terms of the licenses I have used for projects respected and followed. The generative systems I see today are not making the same effort, and that worries me for the future of open source in general. If we all kick the can down the road and say we'll figure it out later, then it may be too late. And regarding licensing and the scope of the Fedora project, what do we do about projects that have set terms on their code that will not accept AI-based or AI-assisted contributions? So we carry a patch in Fedora? We're having to violate our position of upstream first in that case. Or projects that set terms saying our code cannot be used with AI-assisted tools. These may seem far-fetched, but it's not out of the realm of possibilities. At this point in time, I am not sure that Fedora can really have an effective AI use policy that covers these unknowns, but I understand the desire to write and publish one now, but this entire exercise feels more like a game around a foregone conclusion. The concern I have is that by introducing this policy, we run the risk of putting maintainers in a difficult position where patches coming in via Fedora users or via bug reports through Fedora but ultimately pushed upstream, can run the risk of not being accepted upstream if AI systems become large enough in the downstream work and upstream has a no AI policy. I don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we are forced to either ask maintainers to fork projects or undo whatever AI policy we agree on. That sounds extreme, but it's meant as a hypothetical. Since all of these projects in the open want to work together, we should be aware of what upstreams are doing and make sure we don't enact a policy that forbids contribution from us or use of future releases of an upstream project. My concern around licensing is more around AI-assisted contributions using or potentially using code snippets from existing projects, but those AI systems not telling the user where they came from. If these AI systems are capable of generating code based on what it's learned from stuff it found online, then why can't it also know what the license of that code is and ownership and tell the user? I know there is some attempt in getting these systems to do so, but it is not a widely standard thing. But even with these concerns, he still ultimately voted +1 on this, and so did everybody else involved. And now, this has become official Fedora policy. Fedora now has an official policy on AI-assisted contributions. But what do you think? Do you think any of this matters? Do you think they should have a policy? Do you think they shouldn't have a policy? And if they do have a policy, do you think the policy should be a lot more extreme? Do you think they shouldn't allow AI contributions? I'd love to know. So if you liked the video, go like the video, let me know your thoughts down below, go subscribe as well, and if you want to become one of these amazing people over here, check out the Patreon, subscribe to the Barrett Bay linked in the description down below. That's going to be it for me, and what if I'm AI?
Something like this.